like, a few weeks before, and I was like, yeah, I know about that,
So you had just seen the National Lampoon billboard for, what was it called again?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, a something insignificant gesture, or something like that.
Yeah, or futile.
A futile something gesture.
Yeah. Let me look it up.
Which was just brilliant. That whole story was just fantastic.
I'm going to go to the tape.
So when you saw the movie, did you feel like, wow, like, this is my tribe, these are my people. Like, I needed to, if I have the time machine right next to me right now, that would be a time that I transport to and hang out with those writers. Because I tell you, that writing room looked so kick-ass. They looked like they were just having so much fun. A futile and stupid gesture. Oh, my God.
Right? There it is.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I thought Will Forte was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
As Doug Kenny. And I wish I could remember who played Michael O'Donoghue. And all those guys. I mean,
it was great. Martin Mull was in it.
Yeah,
which was just brilliant.
The real Martin Mull.
God, was he part of National Lampoon too?
That I don't recall. And Joel McHale played Chevy Chase, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Anyway, it was just I had seen the billboard, and I was a huge fan of Michael O'Donoghue because I had read the biography of O'Donoghue probably like 15, 20 years ago already. It's called Mr. Mike. I remember that because that was his nickname on SNL when he was a writer and a performer, on-camera performer for SNL. He was the one who wrote, "I would like to feed your fingertips to the Wolverines" for Belushi. And then he would appear as Mr. Mike's bedtime stories, or I forget what the actual title was.
So was he there since the earlier incarnation of SNL?
Yeah, he was there from the very beginning in 1975.
Wow, so that makes sense. Okay, so that's... Because I remember in the movie, Lorne Michaels, talks to Doug Kenny. He's like, "Oh yeah, do you want to be a writer for the show?" And he's like, "Dude, screw you, man. No way. You took all my people."
Yeah, he liked it.
I'm not going to write for you. What you're doing on TV right now is what we're doing on National Lampoon.
He cherry picked all the talent.
John Belushi, Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Rick Moranis. Well, Rick Moranis was not on SNL, was he? He was the SCTV, or was he? Oh no, wait, not Rick Moranis. Harold Ramis, that's what I'm thinking of.
Ramis, yeah.
Harold Ramis was a part of that. National Lampoon. Gilda Radner. Who the heck else were they?
Was Murray in that? Bill Murray?
Oh, yeah, Bill Murray. Oh, yeah.
He was, right? Yeah.
Christopher Guest. He was part of National Lampoon.
Oh, yeah. Shit. Yeah, it's amazing.
And I love the fact, like, just that evolution. It went from, the Harvard Lampoon, and then they go, "Hey, can we kind of license this? Can we I want to keep doing the newspaper." So they do National Lampoon, and then after a while, then they go, "Okay, let's start doing the radio hour." And which, after watching that movie, it led me down the radio hour, like, rabbit hole. I started looking up and listening to the National Lampoon radio hour. Oh, my God, it's just brilliant. It's so good.
Oh, wow, yeah. I've only heard clips of those things over the years, like, going way back, So I've never really gone down that rabbit hole, but I would love to. It's just amazing, the history of all that stuff. And I love in the movie how they keep the guy, what was his name, the main guy, the boss, or if you will, the guy behind the financing and everything. He was
the guy who has the pipe?
Yeah, he was giving him. Oh no, not the pipe. The other guy, the older guy.
Oh yeah.
Where they kept going to him and being like, "Well, here's what we want to do next." He's like, "You guys are going to kill me. You're going to give me a heart attack," and they just kept hammering him, and then they would always somehow work it out where they got their way.
Yeah, they always talked him into it.
But they were pushing the envelope. Obviously, they were evolving, and the growing pains like associated with, moving forward like that. I mean, they were totally expanding the form.
It was cool, too, because they mentioned Mad Magazine in there. They mentioned Mad Magazine in the movie, which was great that they... Now, this is the other thing I'm wondering. I wonder if any Mad Magazine people blended with National Lampoon people. I wonder if there were either writers or, on either side of that coin. That'd be interesting to find out.
That I don't know. I imagine there's probably some, overlap.
So do you think... Mad Magazine has been out a long, long, long time. I mean, do you think that came out before National Lampoon?
Oh yeah, Mad was around. I only know that because during the film on Jim Morrison, the documentary, he read Mad Magazine.
Oh.
When he was a teenager, or even his early teens, in the late 50s. So Mad Magazine's been around at least since the 50s. I think it came out in maybe the mid to late 50s is when it started, offhand. And then obviously the Lampoon was more like what, the early 70s?
Yeah, so
around there?
It totally has that vibe that a lot of those National Lampoon guys were brought up on Mad Magazine.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it feels like. Like they're all these like mischievous, you know. I remember reading my Mad magazines growing up and bringing them to school, and I'd sleep with them under my pillow. And oh god, I love them.
Do you remember the back, the fold out,
the LJ feet?
Yeah, the thing you would fold in or fold out or whatever. That was amazing. Yeah, I always brought those to school. We would trade them at school at lunch or out on the playground.
Mad Magazine. So I don't know if you know this, but they recently they started over at #1 now. Did you hear about that?
No.
So they I mean, it's technically issue 500 and whatever, but right before April, it was a great April Fool's joke. In May, they go, "This is the last issue of Mad Magazine ever," and it tricked me into buying it, and I bought it. And like, this is the last issue of Mad Magazine, and they said, "This is now that we've moved to California, Alfred E. Newman has a whole new look, and we're no longer going to call him Alfred. He's now Al." And you see this picture of Alfred E. Newman. He's standing in a suit, nice-looking suit. His teeth are straight, perfectly white. His hair is combed. His eyes aren't, you know, slightly crooked.
He's got all Hollywood.
Just like, yeah. And they're like,
is that some work done?
They're like, check out the new man, NEU-man. Check out the new man.
Oh, right.
And so there was this big thing of like, and so on the Mad Twitter account, they just kept talking about, you know, all the very sort of shallow stuff that they're going to do with Mad now that they're out here in California. Because, you know, they used to be out in New York.
Yeah.
So right now they're in Burbank. So I want to go in there and interview those guys, either on the podcast or have them come into K-Chung, have them sit in the studio.
That's awesome.
My dream when I was a little kid was to work for Mad Magazine, was to draw, you know, to draw for that comic and stuff. And God, it would be so much fun.
You should show them your stuff.
Wouldn't that be so much?
Your
oh my God,
portfolio.
that'd be so much fun.
That would be amazing.
I'm sure between you and I, we could come up with some fun little...
I had no idea they had rebooted it. I had no idea they're in Burbank.
Isn't that crazy? Well, then they started over with issue #1, and it's so funny because the new look of the magazine, it has the original logo of what Mad Magazine used to be way back then. Remember?
Oh,
okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
do you remember in the old days? So Mad Magazine actually used to have a tinier magazine inside of it. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
my dad used to have all these old Mad magazines. When I go to my grandma and grandpa's house, we go up into the attic, and he had all these old Mad magazines, and in there were smaller magazines.
Yeah, I know. I've seen
it
those.
was so
I
strange.
think my cousin had those. My older cousin.
So Mad, it used to look like sharp, you know, almost like mountains, like cha cha cha.
Yeah, very jagged.
Yeah. So now that's what the new cover looks like.
Wow.
It's so interesting how that happened.
And were they joking about Alfred?
Yeah.
having
Oh
a
yeah.
makeover?
Yeah.
So he's gone right back to what he was.
Yeah,
like
it turns
#1?
out that was their hoax. You know,
April Fool's
it was
joke.
probably to drive up sales or something. But
That's
they
awesome.
came out with the
That's
thing on
brilliant.
Twitter going, yes, at this convention or whatever, you know, this Mad Magazine, you know, executive, you know, made the announcement that it was all a big hoax and it was all a big joke, and you know, don't worry, we're not changing Alfred's image.
That's
don't
brilliant.
worry. I'm so curious what happened to all those old artists, like Mort Drucker. He was one of my favorite artists in there. He was the guy who did all of the parodies of movies and stuff.
Oh yeah. What was the other guy? Don.
There was a Jack Davis. There was that guy. Oh,
Don.
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
He drew like a real elongated kind of.
Yeah,
figures.
and the nose. They would have
And the nose, yeah. And then there was Spy versus Spy.
Don Martin?
Of course. Was it Don Martin?
Don Martin.
That sounds right.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
Let's go to the tape.
But yeah, and then who Spy versus Spy.
Oh, I loved Spy
And I
versus
loved
Spy.
the tiny little. Oh, Spy versus Spy is so good. And then in the tiny little Sergio Aragones.
Yes.
Aragones. He draws all those little tiny guys in the margin. Oh my God.
Yeah, here we go. Don Martin. You were right.
Oh, Don Martin.
Don Martin cartoons.
Was he? So he was in Mad.
All right.
There he is.
Many fingers up the nose, kind of thing.
That Jack Davis, I looked up that guy, and it turns out he lives out in Florida or something, and he still draws. He does like caricatures and stuff. He still draws.
Really? Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, dude, how cool would that be if you just came right back to Mad Magazine? You know, like just start drawing for Mad Magazine. That was one of the things.
Full circle, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so with the with the National Lampoon, the insignificant, or oh gosh, what was that? Something insignificant gesture. That movie. Did you also see that there was a documentary about it too? So after I saw the movie about National Lampoon, I watched the documentary about National Lampoon, and it was great to be able to match up the young faces and the real life people with what I just saw in the biopic.
Whole day. I've been so busy with my own doc that half the time I don't even know what's going on.
It'll inspire you again.
I had no idea someone had done a doc on that. Oh, that's amazing.
It's so cool.
I thought of doing one on. I think I told you. I thought of doing one on O'Donoghue at one point. But that's, oh my God, because it's just so big, like all of those personalities. I can't wait to see that. I need to make a note of that. Do you remember what the doc title is?
Oh God. Something stoned. Stoned something. Oh, damn.
Well, at the very least, I'll just write.
If you look up
National Lampoon doc.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was really cool to see these guys talking about this. And then that led me down a rabbit hole of like looking up interviews with these guys. And one of the guys who was one of the artists for it, he's like, oh yeah, I still draw all the time. It's like, I still have to draw all the time. I have no place, I don't know where, I have nowhere to put this art. Like no one's, he's like, maybe the New Yorker will take it or something. I don't know, but he's like, I have all this art and I'm always still drawing. And I'm thinking, dude, how crazy would that be if I can bridge the gap between National Lampoon and Mad, and I can get that guy to start having his art appear in the Mad magazine? Oh my God, how crazy would that be?
That's amazing. So is he like a retired guy? Like
I tried looking for an email. I tried looking for anything to try to get. Yeah, he's an older fella. I tried looking for anything to try to get a hold of him, and I couldn't find him. I forgot what his name was. But gosh.
Now here's what I'm looking up.
He's so cool.
Now, do you remember? Now that I know this is before our time, but EC Comics.
Oh.
And William Gaines.
Right? Oh, William Gaines was the guy who helped with Mad.
He did, right? Didn't he help launch Mad?
Dude, okay, and that was one of my other things. Right? That was what's so crazy when I saw the biopic about National Lampoons. The crazy thing is, a few months ago when I was out in Chicago, so this is crazy because it ties in a couple of things. A few months ago when I was in Chicago, gosh, maybe... I took my mom's car into the shop. I was sitting there, and something happened where I just started thinking about National Lampoon, and I just started going down the rabbit hole, just researching it, and going, oh my God, I would love it if they made a movie about National Lampoon. And I thought that would be so fun to be the guy who helps bring this story to light. Well, then, little did I realize within, within this time, maybe it was about a year ago, within that time, those two movies ended up becoming, out there in the world. Now, that exploded my brain. Number two, the way that the biopic was edited was exactly the way that I envisioned, and I still would love to, I wanted to do a movie about Mad Magazine. And the way that movie presented National Lampoon was the way that I was envisioning, like the way that they do cut screens and all this crazy stuff, and the way they did montages. That's how I was imagining how this Mad Magazine movie would be. So you see young William Gaines, you see all those artists, you see, it must have been crazy in those Mad Magazine offices. It always has that feeling, right?
Oh, yeah. All cylinders firing at once, Yeah, I love how you said how they did like the split screen, because when I watched it, it made me think of like they literally were, pulling the aesthetic from the pages of the magazine, like where there's the panels and they literally like brought that to life on the screen.
Oh my God!
And it totally worked.
It did.
I loved it. That movie messed me up in a good way. I mean, it was really it stayed with me. It was haunting. The
me
way,
too.
I don't know if we should do.
Give away secrets or anything?
Spoiler alert, right? I mean, anyone who knows the gist of Lampoon knows how things sort of turned out. But I'll just say, to keep it.
You're talking Doug Kenny?
Doug Kenny, yeah. Like the way the film ended, obviously, was just so haunting. And
it was brilliant how they tied that in there.
it was sad, but it was life affirming. But it also captured Kenny's dark sense of humor and the whole. It worked on so many levels. The way, in my opinion, the way they chose to end it, I just thought was fantastic.
Well, dude, and the dialogue between the guys and like the vocabulary they were using, and like just those little simple things where you could tell they got a kick out of play on words and puns. And you never see that in movies where they're just like playing with language. Like there's a part where, the one guy with the pipe, the really intellectual dude. And I just love seeing those guys just riff off each other. It was just so awesome. It's like just watching the wit spark between those guys. There's a part where he goes, "Are you thirsty? Would you like a Sprite?" And it's a Sprite. He's ordering a Sprite. He said, "Would you like a Sprite?" And you're going, "Yes, man, that's awesome." He's playing with the language. It was just so cool. It was so cool to see.
Again, he was fantastic. Forte was fantastic. I always liked that guy for everything he's done, but he was just amazing, I thought. And everyone was great. I mean, I feel bad. I can't off the top of my head think of the guy, the real life guy with the pipe, his partner, in the early in the early days. At any rate, he was awesome too.
Yeah, because the two of them were the co-founders, basically.
Yeah. And then they had that kind of yin-yang dynamic where the one guy was, way more introverted and reserved, and then Kenny was Kenny, like bouncing off the walls, in the best sense of the term, and the way they sparked each other.
Well, it's neat how their sort of precipitation fed one another. So it started with Harvard Lampoon. And then when they decided to get into making movies, they make Animal House, which is based on their college years. So it's like
And then that goes on to be, I think they said, right, the biggest grossing comedy film in history at that point.
And then what a brilliant idea to be like National Lampoon, Animal House. So now, ideally, while that movie's out, it's leading people right back to the magazine.
Yeah.
And then while they got the magazine, they're promoting the movie. So it's just like
synergy.
Either way,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Then of course they could broadcast, promote the radio hour within the magazine too, which was great.
I think they even said, didn't they? They were totally met with opposition. Like, you can't. What you're gonna do a movie about or being all stoned and drunk in your college days and being crazy, like that'll never do anything. Just like they later did Caddyshack, right?
Oh, that's right. That was one of the things that he was so pissed off about, is that they insisted on having that little gopher in there.
Yeah.
That was one of the big things. It's like, they put this gopher in here. What's that gopher doing in there?
The dancing gopher.
Yeah.
I love that gopher.
It's all right. Oh, my God.
He's doing the little...
Oh, yeah. Oh, jeez.
I like when the gopher pops up and he I think he coughs out like a little dust cloud.
Oh, yeah.
And then he starts looking around like this and he's like...
Oh, my God.
Starts shimmying and dancing.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely hilarious. I love that gopher so much that at one point years ago, they sold like a little animatronic version of it, where it would dance around.
Really? Yeah. Did it dance around to that song?
Yeah.
It's all right. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Kenny Loggins, right? Or as I call him, the Loggins.
The Loggins. I mean, that would be interesting. Like, I just had this idea. Kenny Loggins, but he's like dressed as lumberjack, Maybe the name of his album is Timber,
He's the new. He's the new.
He's the new Paul Bunyan.
Excuse me. Yeah, he's the new face of Brawny paper towels with Kenny Loggins. All right.
That's right. Yeah, and it's just a series of things getting spilled.
See, that's an instant karma for me making fun of Kenny Loggins. I start choking on on orange juice.
He hacked in, or logged in, if you will, to your...
I'm Brawny. Don't worry about me. I believe the correct lyric is, why you got to give me fight. Why you got to give me fight. I could be wrong on that. I'm sure I am, actually, but it's still fun.
So do you think that Doug Kenny sort of saw the gopher as like the Jar Jar Binks of Caddyshack?
Yes and yes. Oh my god, I love it. I love that they got that gopher in there.
Yeah.
Man. That's like one of
it added this whole extra surreal element to it.
One of the great moments in Hollywood history, the gopher.
Yeah.
And Bill Murray's interaction with said gopher.
Yeah, because at first...
The varmint, as he said, remember that?
Yeah, at first you could get the idea that maybe the gopher is sort of like the Snuffleupagus. You know, it's like the Snuffleupagus is to Big Bird as this gopher is to Bill Murray's character. Like, maybe it's just imaginary because he's drunk and, like, stoned all the time. But then you realize, oh, wait, this gopher actually is real and it's causing trouble. It's this whole hallucination subtext.
I'm having all these Caddyshack flashbacks now.
Something popped in my brain. You know, I was thinking, okay, so National Lampoon, they ended up putting out the yearbook. Remember they were talking about the yearbook?
Yeah.
And I started thinking about that. Like, dude, that's an untapped resource. Imagine if you were to do a movie version of the National Lampoon yearbook. We get National Lampoon to have it, the National Lampoon yearbook. We use the same characters that are presented in the yearbook. We get people, you know, who look like those characters, and we just have a story. We just piece together, you know, here's this person in the chess club, here's this person here. All those characters are already set up. All we have to do is create a story and plug those guys into something.
Flesh them out.
Yeah, that could be pretty cool. So then it could lead people back to the National Lampoon.
That's a great green button. Absolutely.
Does that guy kind of look like Mickey Rourke from the olden days? Like if he hadn't gotten all the plastic surgery?
Yeah.
It was just like Mickey Rourke. Hello, miss. Wait, do you work here? Or do you just look very official? May I please have some coffee, please?
Regular coffee?
Oh, yes, please.
That'd be great if you don't work here, but you got the coffee anyway.
Yeah.
You're like, watch this. Check this out.
Check it out.
We're good on time. Okay, good. Worldwide or whatever. So, is Anchor? That's the main thing I need to do? Is just get Anchor?
Yeah, download the Anchor app.
Okay.
And it's free. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. And I know, just like you were saying, it's like I could never. It was tricky to wrap my brain around it. It's like, okay, who hosts my podcast? Where do I put the podcast?
Yeah.
How do I make the podcast? How does it get out there to anybody? It was a very sort of unknown thing, and I think that's why I kind of held off. I did let me correct that. I did like 3 episodes of what I call the podcast of Inspirado Projecto, and I just kind of edited the sounds together. The first one was like an hour and a half, and I edited different sounds together, and I just put it up on Mixcloud. You know, I called it a podcast only because I was just defining it as that. I didn't even know if it was actually considered a podcast. You know, it wasn't like something that you could subscribe to. I always heard about this thing called the RSS feed, and I never knew what the heck that was all about. But I knew one little piece of what RSS feed was, is that it was somehow a subscribable thing, and somehow it would show up in your bookmarks or something. I don't know. I don't know anything beyond that. But it was a very confusing thing, and then I was looking into it, and I was just trying to figure it out, and it seemed like there were sites that wanted you to pay money each month for them to host your podcast, and I'm like, well, I just don't know what that's all about. I have no idea. And then Anchor came along, and it's crazy because my dad had told me, he's like, you know, I like listening to your radio show, but it's like my battery runs out on my iPad, you know, while I'm listening to it. He goes, have you thought about making podcasts? You know, maybe 10 minutes here or there, you know, 20 minutes. I thought, well, that's a good idea. So that was in my brain for a while, and then all of a sudden my buddy Lawrence goes, hey, check out this app, check out Anchor. I look at it, and I'm like, and it's not kidding, the easiest way to podcast ever. You download it, you got, you know, like for this, so when you hit the button to hit record, it comes up with a screen. You put your finger down, see where it looks like a locked thing right now? So what you do is, before it's that, it's just a screen, and it shows, it's like, okay, press this button. So what you do is you hold your finger down and you slide it up, and it locks it. So that way I don't have to touch it.
Oh, I see.
Or, that's one way to do it, or you could just, it recognizes if you hold the phone up to your ear, then it'll start going. But that's good for if you're on a phone with someone or something, but not good if you're trying to do a podcast. You're like, okay, I got this, I got to hold my hand up this whole time. So
for 45 minutes.
Yeah. So once I figured out that you could go, and then it locks the microphone in place.
Will you send me, I'm writing all this stuff down, will you send me the link for your mic?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You just
for
get
sure.
it on Amazon or whatever.
Oh
right?
yeah. I was looking up smartphone mics, and I got this one. I also got another one. I don't experiment with the other one as much as this one, only because my adapter on my phone, this has a longer, I guess, I don't know what you call it, end to it, so it goes up in there. My other microphone, I'd have to take this little piece off and plug it in.
Oh, okay.
It might be a crispier one. Anyway, so basically, yeah, for something like this kind of microphone would be good.
Yeah, because the case goes past the...
Yeah.
Goes outside the jack or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will let you know where to get that microphone. But yeah, it used to be a big mystery for me too about podcasts. I mean, it was just such a big mystery. And then once Anchor came along, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
I mean, it takes all the guesswork out of it.
It does.
You know, it just lets you get up and running. I mean,
well, yeah, and that's the thing too. Even if you do the poor man's version, quote, poor man's version, unquote, which I was doing in the very, very beginning, which was I would just hit record, and I would just record it for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, who knows, 15 minutes or something. And then bam, that was my podcast. Okay, publish it. You know, give it a name, give it a little description. Okay, bam, publish it. And then I started kind of feeling more and more secure with how it was working and seeing how its behavior was. And then I started figuring out that I could, like behind this talking right now, I could actually add. They have a selection of 20 different just ambient sounds that you could already place underneath.
So you can do
this.
the actual background music and everything?
Yeah, within it.
That's amazing.
So then I could just pick one of those things, you know. Let's say if I'm telling a spooky story, there's a thing on there that's called Weirder Things, which kind of sounds like a Stranger Things kind of music.
Yeah.
There's one that sounds like, or it's one that says Ghost, which is kind of like, you know, kind of an ethereal sound. There's one that's, you know, futuristic, so it's like, bloop, 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 you know, all kinds of different little sounds.
What if you want to do, can you customize? You can do your own thing too and then patch it
I don't
in?
think you could,
Or
well,
Or that's a whole
the way that you would do that is you would have to edit that separately, probably on a different program, and then bring it into like your laptop version or something. You know, if you did that and you saved it to a file.
So who owns it? Do you own the once it goes on iTunes and all that? Is it owned?
I guess.
Like you own Inspirado Projecto?
I
I mean, if it
think
ever
about
came
that.
down to that, I don't know.
I think so. I hope so.
It's an interesting thought.
I
Like
hope
who
I
owns
would.
the content, or is it fair use, or is it?
It's such a good question, because there was a while ago where people were saying that anything you post on Facebook,
or
Facebook
public domain,
owns
I
or
guess.
something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
right?
like, wait, hold on a second. Why am I just learning this now?
Yeah. So those pictures of my kid, you own.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg owns it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. I know we were talking earlier, like the whole history. Maybe there's the topic of my next podcasts. Although somebody's probably done one. But like
The history of podcasts?
Yeah, just like how it's gotten to this point of traction. Because like we were saying earlier, off mic, I guess. You know, like it seems like 10 or 15 years ago, could be longer. Like I remember back when people had Blogger, remember Blogger?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Like that's definitely 15, 20 years ago, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like seeing the little RSS feed icon, just like you did.
Yes.
And what is this mysterious little thing? And yes, I know what it does in theory.
Right.
But did I ever take the time to like dive into that? No, because juggling all the other stuff. But you'd hear about like, oh, so and so has a podcast, using the air quotes, right? And I remember just thinking it was such a cool concept, but like, where do you get them? Where do you find them? Where do you hear them? Other than on some guy's blog that you happen to come across before you go to bed one night on your laptop, and then you forget about it.
Right.
And now, clearly, like I assume back then, even in the early days of iTunes, podcasts probably weren't on there, or certainly not the way they are now. At any rate, they're gaining traction. It's become a definite thing in the zeitgeist.
It's crazy.
You
I
know?
was just reading recently, there was an article where it was saying that podcasts are now becoming like the new wave of like it's so crazy. We're successfully the revelation struck me that I am actually now living in the moments of life where I actually have my own network, so to speak, my own radio network, so to speak. in addition, let's say K-Chung, yeah, I got my own radio show. This is my own. I mean, it blows my mind the fact that we can create something like this podcast. It goes out to iTunes. It goes out to who knows how many other, depending on however many podcast directories you place it in. Depending on how many apps pick it up, there are a bunch of different podcast apps out there too. So now people, they just stumble across this stuff while they're looking at another podcast. They'll say like, okay, you might like this, kind of like how they do on YouTube. Oh, if you like this video, you might like these. And so now it seems like more and more now people could just accidentally stumble into your podcast.
The Matrix.
Yeah, and then you become the information for something that someone out there is doing, like my buddy John Garside. Now he's contributing. He's a Forgotten Tales guy. He's on Anchor. He's now contributing stuff. And we just came to that revelation of like, holy cow, here we are standing in the future now. Like, we no longer have to worry about, will a famous radio station out there ever have an interview with me or play my music? Okay, who cares? Dump it into your podcast, upload it to iTunes. Now anybody everywhere can hear it globally.
dare we say it's like what the equivalent, the analog to like punk rock, like DIY, do it yourself, just do it, just grab it and do it. You don't need to be like even a couple months ago when you and I talked about this, or maybe it was better part of a year ago already, when you were back then, you were inspiring me. You were like, you got to do one of these, and just like you did with Instagram. Remember, for years you were like, you got to get on there. Only took me like 4 or 5 years, but even then, like I remember thinking, okay, or asking you, I was like, so what do I need to get? Like pro grade headphones? I have those. Like I thought I needed to get like the headphones, the mic, the whole kit, like the podcast kit. And I know because I checked it out. They sell them on Amazon or whatever. But even now, you're saying like you don't even need to do that. You just get the iPhone and go, or your whatever smartphone.
Anchor is like the ultimate, like ultimate. I'll say it this way, like, for the person who really would prefer not to edit a whole bunch of stuff together and deal with a whole bunch of technical stuff, Anchor is that person's dream for podcasting. Which is that part of me, that's why it appeals to that part of me concerning such an unknown territory, if that makes sense. Like, if I'm going to enter an unknown territory, I would really like it to be, give me the golden nuggets. You hand me those so I know what to do in this area. This is that. So it's like,
that's awesome.
You just want to get your quote on it, and there it goes.
That's totally me, because if you're slammed for time, time constraints or whatever, your job, your kids, your commitments, all the various things, then like this is a way for you to just dive in and do it. Well, there's no excuse not to do it.
Dude, and you can record people before your swim meets, after your swim meets. You can talk to your coach, so how long have you been doing this? Or, what strange stories have you come across? And, everyone then becomes a potential interviewee. Everyone then becomes a
That's really funny you say that, because I don't know if I've told you. I think it happened months ago, but it happened again. I blew out my right shoulder again.
Oh, God.
So doing sprints in the pool with my coach, or my trainer, Mario. And it's an old injury from high school, but at any rate, I haven't been able to do any meets because that's what you do. You're sprinting. I was always a sprinter, so now it's kind of fun for me. Like I'm just doing drills with him that aren't invasive, aren't specific to the windmill. Even that hurt.
Oh, geez.
The windmill action of swimming freestyle or whatever. So now I just more like kickboard stuff and working on my core and all this kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm not doing the meets, then I can at least still work out and just make sure I don't hammer my shoulder. And so now it's fun for me, like that because you mentioned that once before, like you could interview the people on your team. Like I'm still on the team and I still work out, but I just don't go to the meets. And but now maybe I will. Maybe I'll have I'll hit it from another angle, like I get a mic like you have and just go, hey, do you want to be part of this episode about swimming?
So much fun.
Swimming as an adult,
Well, and it's great too. It's perfect for like times where you're waiting for something, or there's, let's say you've got a meeting with your lawyer or something, and he's out to lunch, be back in 15 minutes. Well, okay, cool. While you're there, freaking make a podcast.
Right.
You know, it's perfect. While you're sitting in the car, or while you're driving someplace, you know, just put this right on the seat next to you.
While you're pumping gas in your car and you got the little clip on auto.
Oh, yeah.
You just make a podcast in those 7 minutes or whatever
shit,
it is,
yeah,
5 minutes.
Yeah, and then interview the guy behind the desk, you know,
Right.
on the counter. It's
Say,
amazing.
can you change the oil? Say.
Oh, yeah,
Can you do this pod? Can you be a guest on the podcast?
Say, tell us about your gasoline.
So
Say.
I gotta tell you this. This is amazing. So, obviously you've met Heidi, right?
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't, my girlfriend Heidi. She's a huge podcast enthusiast. She listens to these amazing, like she's turning me on to so many different ones. Like there's one about wine that takes all like the bourgeois elements of the world of wine out of the equation and just brings it down to earth and pops a lot of those balloons, those myths about wine, and it's just amazing. It's really entertaining. But and then there's a bunch about Joshua Tree. I told you about that. Or there's a few anyway about Joshua Tree and living in Joshua Tree or what goes on out in the desert. And,
wow.
Like where you and I went out there for Desert Days a few years ago. And that's when Joshua Tree really got under my skin. Like I'd always been fascinated with the desert.
Oh, yeah.
Largely because of, I think, growing up with Jim. Like Morrison singing Riders on the Storm and his whole riff about an existential hitchhiker in the desert and desert themes and stuff. So it was always like in the back of my brain. But the last like 4 or 5 years, I've started reading Dwell magazine about container homes made out of shipping containers.
Yes.
People living in these out in the Joshua Tree area, the desert, the Yucca Valley. So there's podcasts about anything you can name. But my favorite one, Heidi turned me on to this one. I looked it up because I couldn't remember the name. I'm not sure if it's the actual podcast name, but it's a dude. It's a dude who reads the newsletter that Trader Joe's puts out. Like I think it's a monthly newsletter. I've seen it a million times, but it's called the Fearless Flyer.
So all he does is he reads
He
it?
literally reads the Fearless Flyer, and it's one of the most fascinating things I've ever. And it's hilarious, but it's also informative. It works like on every level.
That's incredible.
So I highly recommend you check out this guy's podcast.
Well, it's so crazy because my buddy John Garside was telling me, he's like, I had been thinking about doing a podcast, and he's like, okay, and then I thought, okay, how do I start a podcast? And he's looking at these websites, and the websites are like, well, and they're giving you just these like strict like rules and regulations, and well, you better have this, and you've got to have that, and you better have this, and it's got to be that way, and it's got to be this quality. So it's like this this huge like.
Yeah.
So then it got into his head where he got intimidated, going, oh geez, well what subject? I mean, what subject am I going to do? What am I going to do? And
like,
I said,
where do you even begin? Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, well, John, what's so crazy? Like, and this goes along with what you're saying. Everybody's life is a life that no one else is living, which is a brand new perspective, a brand new channel of information that, like you're saying, Joshua Tree. Someone out in Joshua Tree go, why would anyone want to know about my life? Well, people who don't live in the desert, people who, would like to know, what do you do? Eat rattlesnakes all day? Like, what goes on out there? So it's interesting because everyone's got something very important to say. Now, there are those that Venn diagram with those who listen to him. So let's say there are people who live out in frickin', I don't know, the desert, deserts in a different area, and they're listening to the podcast of those who live in Joshua Tree. They could be like, oh, I relate to that, or, oh, wow, we don't have cacti like that where we live, There could be something they relate to. People who listen to it like yourself, who do not live in the desert, now you got that new information, so there's always something good, there's always something awesome coming out of it, and so that's the funny thing, even if you just ramble, even if you just speak gibberish, I mean, there's something that can be learned or something that can inspire someone to do something. Like, I'll tell you right now, utilizing this as a scratching board, as just a whiteboard of just, it's like this podcast to me is like the equivalent of doodling while you're on the phone. Doodling while you're on the phone. Get out any criticism, wash out any overanalyzations, and it's first thought, best thought. Just there we go, there it is. And you put it out there. Now what happens is, let's say, for instance, while I'm walking down the street on my way to the bus stop, and I have some revelation about something, and I'm talking. Now what's so cool is now this opens up the opportunity for things like synchronicity to come swooping in. Unknown, surprise, cosmic circumstances to go, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, do you know what? I was just talking about that, and guess what, guys? A fire engine just drove past. We were just talking about fire engines. Listen to that, guys. Look what we did. So then you can be like, holy cow, I was there with this person while they experienced this revelation, this epiphany, this synchronicity, whatever this cosmic moment was. Or I get to hear them at, okay, sometimes I'll play a riff. A riff will come into my mind, and I go, okay, I'm going to play a riff. I play 30 seconds of a riff, there it is, bam, there it is on the podcast. Will I use that song in the future? Perhaps. If not, it's there, it's documented. I can always go back and I can listen to it. Heck, anyone else is available to utilize any of the stuff that's on this podcast. Would I appreciate it if they said, gave me some credit or said, hey, Kurt, I like what you did on thing. Let's collaborate on doing this thing. Like, that would be awesome. Like, that would be phenomenal. Could you imagine if you got 10 different people who've listened to 10 different podcasts of yours, or even 10 different people listen to the same podcast, and each of those people get a different idea of one of the subjects that you said during that podcast, and this person goes, ooh, I like that riff. I got some lyric ideas, and I got a good bridge. I just came up with a good bridge. Let's collaborate on that song. Awesome, cool. Another person goes, hey, that crazy idea that you had about the astronaut bouncing around, on a cheese trampoline. I love that idea. I'm going to write that story. Do you want to help me out with it? Yeah, sure. Another person goes, ooh, that's that dream that you had about eating the peanut butter jelly sandwich. That sounds real good. Let's write a poem about it. Cool. Could you imagine how crazy that would be if now all of a sudden you got all these collaborators have now just sprouted up out of nowhere?
Tell that. Can you retell that story you told me earlier today, like about how you were doing the would-be theme songs for other podcasts?
Oh yeah,
right?
So I was going through those on Anchor. You can actually find at the top. It'll just feature a bunch of podcasts. So you can click on the podcast. It'll show you the screen, and then at the top of it says message. So at the top when it says message, what's so cool is you could press that and you can leave like a minute-long thing. So I've just been going through for that minute, sometimes 15 seconds, sometimes less, sometimes a full minute, and I'll just spontaneously sing them the theme song. I'll just go. Let's say if there's this, for instance, there's the podcast Over the Thread. So I might just suddenly, just start singing, over the thread, don't step over the thread, there's something crazy over the thread, thank you. And then I just hang up and there it is. And then I title it Over the Thread theme song. And then I'll just send that to these people. Now, there have been 3 or 4 occasions where then I got a return message from them going, oh my God, I love this. How can I use this? Or can I use this? Or they just go ahead and they just feature it in the next podcast. And I'm like, that's so cool. That's so great they did that. That was just my little gift to them. So that's what I love about it too. And the fact that you could just call up other podcasters and be like, okay, cool. This is being recorded right now. We're actually making a podcast right now. And this is, recorded for archival purposes for our future selves to listen to. How cool is that?
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, it's so just amazing. So fun, man, to just make it happen. Like, otherwise you just overthink it, analyze stuff till the cows come home and you won't get anything done. So you just dive in. I'm definitely gonna do one. Maybe I'll do 2. I don't know, but I'm at that point. Been thinking about it for the last year, I guess. Definitely burning at the back of my brain.
Well, the cool thing is, this is the crazy thing. No matter how well you plan it out, and you rack your brain trying to plan it out, make it perfect. No matter what, as things just naturally happen for us, as creative people specifically, it's going to morph. It's going to always shapeshift into something else.
Yeah, evolving.
So, even if we go, okay, this is my limit, this is my perspective, and it's going to stay within this, and this is going to be the streamlined subject of the podcast. Well, when you little by little, like that phrase nickel and diming, it's just like slowly chiseling away till you don't realize that you're just standing on a toothpick. Like, well, how did this happen? I was on a tree before. How did this happen? You've nickel and dimed my tree away. What have you done? This is kind of like that same kind of thing, because as you go along, you go, oh, I have an idea. Let's add this to it, and now that grows an extra thing to it, and it's going, and you go, oh, let's add this other extra thing to it, and now that's growing, right? So each time, after even 10 episodes, 5 episodes, it's now a different podcast than the podcast that you originally intended on doing in the first place anyway. So just knowing that and resting easy in that leaves so much liberty to just create whatever the hell you want.
It's like a quilt.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, patchwork quilt.
Yeah.
My podcast of many colors. All right, let me check. Okay, go ahead.
This is John from Forgotten Tales, and you're going to go on an adventure with me for Inspirado Projecto. I'm going to go order a Frappuccino. So, yeah, it'll be exciting. Let's see what happens. I'm walking down the street. Stay tuned.